Ashen is an action role-playing game developed by New Zealand studio A44. I played the base game on a release on PC back in December. After many months of silence, they have finally released their first piece of DLC content, Nightstorm Isle. Is it worth the price? Let's find out. Nightstorm Isle can be experienced at any point during Ashen. A44 have recommended, however, that you complete Yokel's side story Birthright before meeting up with Cole and starting your journey to the Isle. The boat to enter the Isle is found near the Whisper's Shrine, so you'll have to at least get to this point in the game before you can enter the Isle. Your reasons for entering the Isle revolve around Amara, one of your companions, and her search for her lost daughter. Back in December, when I played Ashen on its initial release, I was really impressed with the game as a whole. The art style I really love, the big open vistas, and the sense of wonder you feel in the world never really left me throughout my time with the game. The music is also fantastic, some of which you can hear in this video. The combat was and still is a well-crafted experience. I was really looking forward to playing some more Ashen and getting a new experience with the game with this DLC. The new location adds to this sense of wonder I felt with the main game, with the cave paintings which tell a story as you enter the Isle and new and interesting areas to explore. The DLC adds 3 areas to explore: the initial beach landing and its dive into the depths of the Isle, the city deep underground, after which is a pretty linear path to the boss which has some side paths. Each of these areas have their own shrine, however only the shrine near the city will allow you to travel to other shrines like back to Vagrant's Rest. The DLC doesn't really add anything unique to the combat loop. There are new enemies to encounter, but they play the same way as most of the enemies in the main game. The combat itself plays a lot of the same tricks as the main game, maybe a few too many times, especially in the first area. When you go to loot an item, more often than not an enemy will jump around behind you, which isn't a new thing in these kind of games, but it happens a few too many times in quick succession, and I feel it gets a bit redundant. It isn't really testing my skill, especially compared to a lot of the later areas in the base game where you're more involved in how you're going to clear a room or a large open area rather than waiting for a surprise from picking up an item. Overall though, the new areas are definitely enjoyable to explore. My favourite area for sure was the city, which is a very open, large area with a lot of pathways and hidden items to find. The other 2 areas are much more linear, but they do have small pathways that you can move off to explore as you're trying to go from A to B. The DLC adds 2 new shields, 3 new weapons, and 5 armor pieces from what I found. There may be more, but I did explore as much as I could during my time on the Isle, and I couldn't seem to find anything else. The DLC adds 1 real boss fight at the end, and separate to that there is a kind of a mini boss. I don't really know if it really is a mini boss, it is just a more difficult, unique enemy that wasn't too much trouble to deal with. I did play this DLC with a character who has finished the main story, and from what I found, it is definitely too easy for someone at max level. If you're playing on the Children of Cisna mode, it might be a little different, but as a max level character, a lot of the enemies weren't too much trouble to deal with. Thinking back, I think the first time that I used my guard was on that first mini boss, unique enemy, whatever you want to call it. Not to say it wasn't a challenge, but I didn't feel that the enemies added too much where I had to worry about what was happening around me. There was a couple of corners where enemies would surprise you, but overall it wasn't too much trouble. The last thing I'll say is that the DLC is very short. I recorded my entire playthrough from start to finish, and it took me about an hour and a half on the normal difficulty. If you were playing this DLC the moment you got to the Whispers, it may take you longer as you won't have all of the endgame armor and equipment, but I couldn't foresee this taking you longer than 2 hours unless you got stuck on the final boss, or were playing in the Children of Cisna mode. Speaking of the final boss, he does have some interesting mechanics which are unique to him, but I did beat him on my first try. I wouldn't say that it was because of my level, but I think the first phase of him was relatively easy to read his mechanics and adjust to your playstyle, and having a follower with you kind of makes that whole process much easier as he just hits her for half the time and you can read his attacks. This DLC is 10 USD on the Epic Game Store and on Microsoft. Ashen, the base game, is a part of the Game Pass on console, but this DLC does have to be purchased separately from what I can tell. The DLC overall is just more Ashen, but the question is an hour and a half of more Ashen worth $10 to you? If you played the base game on Game Pass and got the game as part of that, maybe the $10 is worth it for you. I really enjoyed the base game and I was definitely keen to play more Ashen, but I was really hoping for more than an hour and a half of game time. I wouldn't say my time here was bad or I didn't enjoy myself, as I definitely did, but for 10 USD I would like more than an hour and a half of game time. This DLC is definitely worth adding to your game if it goes on sale. I wouldn't pay the full $10 here for an hour and a half experience unless you were very much in love with Ashen and just needed more, but it was an enjoyable experience, don't get me wrong. It was just not what I was looking for the cost, and I would have definitely enjoyed more gameplay, more new areas to explore, which hopefully we'll get in some later iterations of DLC, as I would love to play more Ashen. If you have any questions or would like to know more about Ashen or the DLC, please leave a comment below and I'll try and get back to you. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.